What's up, everyone? Coming to you live tonight from Roanoke, Virginia. We're finally back at our hometown. We're spending the weekend at CSM, and that was awesome. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about traveling as a new grad. We're also going to talk a little bit about our experience at CSM and some of the awesome people we got to meet. So Whitney's going to give an introduction about who we are, talk a little bit about CSM, and then we'll get into talking about traveling as a new grad.
Hey guys, so Jared's going to get this video shared up in the Doctor of Physical Therapy group so more people can join in. If you guys are joining in right now on the live video, go ahead and comment below and tell us who you are, where you're coming from, and what interests you about travel therapy. So for those of you that may not know us, my name's Whitney and this is Jared. We are the faces behind the Fifth Wheel Physical Therapy blog. So our blog has been around for a couple of years, and you might have noticed from that. Just recently, a few months ago, we actually started a new website called Travel Therapy Mentor, and we have a partner on that website who's also a travel physical therapist named Travis Kemper. So if you guys haven't checked us out, go ahead and you can follow us on our blog, Fifth Wheel PT, or our new website, Travel Therapy Mentors. I want to apologize. I'm losing my voice just a little bit. We actually went to CSM, the National Physical Therapy Conference this weekend, and we were doing so much talking, and a lot of the events were kind of like social events. So there's loud music and lots of loud talking, and so I felt like I kept having to yell. So I'm actually losing my voice a little bit. So let me know if you can hear me okay. And then here I'm kind of crunching on a cough drop. So my bad. But yeah, so we had an amazing experience at CSM. So we wanted to jump on and talk a little bit about that. We did not plan to go to CSM this year. We had no idea where we would be. So we are both traveling physical therapists, and we thought that we might be on contract out in Arizona. And if any of you guys follow our story, we spent 5 months out of the country. We went to 11 different countries all around the world. And so we thought, we would just be getting back from that trip in December. And then we thought maybe we might be all the way out on the West Coast, and CSM was in Washington, D.C. So we didn't sign up. We didn't get tickets or anything like that. But turns out we're still here in Virginia, which is home for us, in Roanoke, Virginia. So at the very last minute, literally the day before, we were like, you know what, why don't we just drive up there and we could at least network with some people and meet them, even if we don't have tickets and weren't registered for CSM. But anyway, through chatting with some people, we actually ended up being able to get into the conference. So we want to give a huge shout out to Total Med, which is one of the travel therapy companies that we work with. We actually reached out to them, and they were like, you know what, you can come hang out with us at our booth. So we actually got to get into the conference as exhibitors, which was so cool. And it ended up being just a wonderful experience. We got to talk to so many people. We got to meet a lot of folks that we've kind of networked with online before, different physical therapists, as well as people in the travel community. It was so great to meet you guys. A lot of you guys came up and said that you recognized us from the blog, which was just really humbling and amazing. We also got to network with a lot of our old friends and colleagues and PT classmates. Because it was in DC, which is not far from where both of us went to physical therapy school. Shout out Old Dominion University, which is where I went, and Bradford is where Jared went. So it was just a wonderful experience. We had a great time. But again, I want to give huge props to Total Med for bringing us on and showing us a great time this weekend and letting us hang out at your booth. So those of you guys that are hopping on, if you are interested in travel therapy, please send us a message and we'd be happy to get you connected with our recruiter at Total Med. They're a really great company to work for. So anyway, Jared's getting this video up and shared in the DPT group. So if you guys are just joining on, would you please say hi, comment below, and let us know who you are. We'd love to know who it is that's tuning in. Are you a current student? Are you a recent grad? Are you a clinician that's been out for a while? Today we mostly want to focus on talking about the hot topic of travel therapy as a new grad, because that's something we get so many questions about. So yeah, a lot of people, that was a big thing they had a question about this weekend, right, Jared?
Yeah, we talked about that a ton. We met so many second and third year students that are interested in traveling, and most of them talk about how they hear a lot of stories about how they shouldn't travel as new grads, or they hear bad things reading online that people get put in bad situations as travelers and things like that. So anyone that's interested in traveling as a new grad, I'd love to hear what you guys have heard about traveling. When you're talking to people, current travelers or professors or classmates, what have you heard about traveling as a new grad? Is it something that people recommend, or they say don't do it, or our experience usually was that people said that they were told they shouldn't do it.
Yeah, it was actually really interesting. One person that came up to the booth this weekend was a clinician, and she was a little bit older, and so I said, hey, are you interested in travel therapy? And she said, I'm not, but I'm actually a professor at one of the DPT programs, and I wish I remember which program she was a professor at.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But we chatted with her for a little while, and she said, hey, I've had more and more students asking about getting into travel therapy, so what can you tell me about it, and what is your advice for new grads? So I gave that professor some information to spread to her students. So anyway, we just wanted to kind of go over some things as far as traveling as a new grad. We both actually started traveling right out of school in 2015. And we had heard some of those things where some people said, maybe you shouldn't travel right away, might not be the best thing for a new grad. But we've had a wonderful experience. We would not go back and do it over, we wouldn't change our decision at all. So we've been traveling ever since 2015, right after graduation. So for 3.5 years going strong, and it's been excellent for us.
Yeah, there are some things to consider though. It's a very individual decision. Not for everyone, of course, depending on your family situation and how close you need to be to home, things like that. But it definitely is something that is a possibility as a new grad. We have done it, and we know a lot of people, other travelers that have also done it and had great experiences with it. But you also do hear bad stories, so we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I see a couple of you have joined in live. I see Josh Jones is on here. Hey, Josh. He's a clinician that we actually met while we were traveling, which is super cool. I see Noah and Janelle are on. Tagging a couple friends. Thank you for doing that. So if you guys are hopping on and watching, just drop us a line down below. Just say who you are. Are you a current student? Hey, Josh. What year are you in school? What are you thinking about travel therapy? Just drop us a line below. That way we can kind of see who our audience is. And then also the more people that comment and like the video, that way more people will be able to see it and get the information out there. So drop us a line below. So let's talk about some of the considerations. Okay. Travel therapy as a new grad is not for all new grads. So what are some things you need to think about in yourself in order to be a good travel therapist right as a new grad, okay?
So one of the main things is, on your last clinical, how do you feel when you go into it, or when you're finishing the clinical? So do you feel like you need a lot of help from the CI, or do you feel like you're pretty independent? That's probably the biggest thing. So if you feel pretty independent at the end of your clinical, you got good remarks from your CI, what is it, the CPI, right?
I think.
Yeah, if that went well and they said that you're doing well, you feel comfortable evaluating and treating patients, then, that's something that might be an option for you.
Yeah, so I think confidence is the biggest thing. So if you have confidence in your skill set and your ability to go out and be a good clinician right away, then travel therapy might be right for you. Your professors and other clinicians and things can say, hey, it may not be right for everyone, but really you have to know yourself and know how confident you're going to feel. So I know for me, I was a little on the fence about it. I knew that's what I wanted to do, but I made sure going into my final 2 clinicals, my 3rd year, I said, hey, to my clinical instructors, I'm really interested in doing travel therapy, so I need to get myself to a point where I'm very independent, kind of like a little less hand-holding, so that way I could ensure that I was going to be ready for travel therapy and set up for success. So another thing...
yeah, on the clinicals, this is another aspect that you should pay attention to. Like, how quickly are you able to learn new documentation systems? So, like in your last clinical, hey Kaylee, thanks for joining.
Hi Kaylee.
Your last clinical, you start there, you have a new documentation system. How quickly are you able to learn and adapt to that? Because, when you take a travel assignment, it's just like a clinical. You go in there, you just have less help. You have less mentorship, I would say. So you go in, you have to learn the documentation system more quickly than you would as a student. So that's a big factor. How quickly are you able to learn and adapt to new documentation systems and new settings?
Yep.
New environments.
Yeah, that's a big one because you're only going to be there for maybe 13 weeks. That's usually about the average. So it's kind of like another short clinical as far as adapting and adjusting to the schedule and being able to do that pretty confidently. So the other thing that I think that you should consider as far as whether you should join and start up as a travel therapist as a new grad is, are you okay with moving around and adapting to a new city very quickly? Some people are more introverted and they're not going to feel as comfortable with being in a new city all by themselves where they may not know anybody. But if you know yourself and you know you're pretty adventurous, you're going to be able to make friends with your coworkers, you're going to be able to make friends in the community, and you feel confident living on your own and jumping around city to city, then that's something that's really a pro for you as becoming a travel therapist as a new grad.
Yep.
Of course, another option is to travel as a pair, like we do, and then you have to worry a little less about finding a new community when you get there than if you were by yourself. Okay, I see some people are commenting. What we're going to do is we're going to leave some questions till the end, and then we'll kind of touch on that then. So if you guys have any questions about traveling as a new grad, please leave them below, and then at the end we'll answer your questions.
Yep. One other thing that I think is important to talk about is a lot of the people we talked to this past weekend were students that were nervous and said, like, I don't really know. I feel like I'm not going to be able to adapt quickly. And it's an individual decision, but everyone's going to be nervous. Like, we're on our 12th contract. We're still nervous when we go there. It's normal to be nervous. You kind of have to be objective in it, because you're going to feel like you might not be ready. It might not be perfect. You're always going to have those doubts. But as long as you're pretty confident in your skill set, then you should be confident in your ability to adapt and be able to succeed in each place you go to.
Right. So the next thing we want to touch on is, if you decide to do travel therapy as a new grad, there's some things you want to think about for your first couple of contracts. So you want to set yourself up for success. Now, the biggest thing is having a recruiter that you trust, because you need to discuss with them your goals and your experiences so they can help set you up in an environment at a first job that's going to set you up for success. So some things like, who are the other clinicians that are there? Ideally, if you're a PT, it'd be great to have another PT there. If you're an OT, it'd be great to have another OT there. Speech therapist, same thing. The next thing to ask is, okay, if for example, there isn't someone of your same profession there that you might be able to ask questions, if it's an inpatient especially, even if you have like an OT or a speech or a PT that's not of your profession, so if you're a PT, if you had an OT or a speech therapist there, they could help you with things like, okay, Medicare documentation, billing, setting up your schedule for the day. Say it was a sniff or it was an acute care. They could just help you with those kind of day-to-day like organizational things, or what's the facility's policy on this? How do you guys usually do this? That sort of thing. And I actually found that in my first job. I did not have another PT there, but I did have an OT and a speech therapist, and they were so helpful. And we were even able to do some like co-evals, which really helped me as a new grad to just, get my feet on the ground. And then the other thing is, like, even if you're a PT or an OT, assistants. So some PTAs and OTAs really have a lot of experience, and if there was some more PT-based questions that you might have, maybe your PTA could help you if they have 10 or 20 years of experience. So asking those questions during the interview for your first job are going to be really important. Hey, Matt.
George, he commented he's a PTA, been traveling as a new grad as well.
Yeah.
And he's been killing it lately. 5 years traveling as a new grad is awesome.
Wonderful. So what are some other things as far as mentorship that you could look for in your first couple assignments?
So, yeah, like Whitney was talking about, the interview is huge. When you're interviewing with a facility, asking the right questions, making sure that everything is exactly how you want it, or at least something that is reasonable for your situation. So, yeah, asking all the questions, who's going to be there, what, if there'll be any kind of orientation phase, if there's like a ramp-up phase. For new grads, that's usually a big thing. So, for example, on my first contract, I had a long orientation phase, which was really, really nice for me because it was a setting I wasn't really comfortable in. Whereas Whitney did not have any kind of orientation phase at all. And that's something that if we knew better on the first contract, if we had really asked those questions on the interview, then she would have been more prepared for that. But, you go in expecting that you might have a half of a day of orientation and learning the facility and everything, and then you're expected to see a full caseload on the first day. That's not a good situation. Mm-hmm. So, but you can figure all that stuff out on the interview as long as you ask the right questions. Yeah. So the interview is a huge part of being successful as a new grad, I think. The very first interview and choosing the right facility for you. So if you're interviewing for a facility and you start getting bad vibes about like their productivity standards or how many PTAs you're going to be PTAs or techs and things that you're having to supervise, those kind of things, make sure the first one is a good one, because if not, you have a bad experience on the first one, then that's going to kind of taint your experience with travel altogether.
Right. So. Now, another big question we always get, and people want to know, okay, is there any way to get mentorship if you're going in as a travel therapist as a new grad? So the forms of mentorship we already talked about were if you can get set up at a good clinic, and there are some out there. Now, there are certain clinics that are not going to be good or not be like new grad friendly, as we'd call it. But if there is a clinic, maybe, for example, a rural one where it's a little slower paced and they do have another person of your same profession on staff, that's great mentorship. Now, if they're not able to have somebody on staff, a lot of times travel companies, like, for example, the one I mentioned earlier, Total Med, that we were hanging out with at CSM this weekend, Total Med has a mentor program by phone. And I know a lot of the other travel companies also offer mentors by phone. At one of the companies we work with, they have a senior clinician, so someone who's been in the profession for maybe 30 years. They call him the clinical liaison. And so this person is someone that you can call for an unbiased opinion. And I actually did call this person on my first contract because I had some concerns about the facility and the productivity standards and that sort of thing and ethical billing. And this person was able to really help me and guide me and offer an unbiased stance, which was super helpful. Now, I know with the other company, Total Med, they offer a clinical mentor that's actually another travel therapist that works for them that can talk you through things. And that's a really great mentorship opportunity.
Yeah, especially if they're working in the same setting as you, because they go into different facilities just like you are, and they know how it's been. You know, someone with, say, 3 years of experience going in and out of SNFs has a really good idea of how to help you optimize your productivity, how to resist anything that's unethical, all those things that you would be nervous about.
Right. And then some other lesser thought of maybe mentorship opportunities are if you really have a tough clinical case, reach out to colleagues and people online that you know. There's a lot of good networking that can happen online, as well as through old professors. I had a couple of times where I reached out to old professors and said, hey, I remember you talked about this in class, or, you know, what do you think from your experience? And they're usually very happy to help you. And if you've been through several years of your professional program, you know the best thing to do. You know that you can do no harm is the number one thing. You're going to get through the day. You're going to get through that eval. You're going to get through that treatment session. Maybe you need to go home and you need to go read something, brush up on something for the next treatment session. Yep. But you're going to get through that day and you're not going to do any harm to the patient. So it's just all about knowing yourself and reaching out for those mentorship opportunities.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Whitney really calmed my fears on a lot of the assignments I went to where I wasn't really that comfortable because, yeah, worst case scenario, you struggle your way through the evaluation or through that treatment for the day of the person you don't know, and then you go home and you do research and then you come way more prepared next time because you're going to run into situations with patients that you're not comfortable with or that you've never seen before, and it's okay when that happens. You just do no harm, you read about it, and then you go in better prepared next time, and that's completely fine.
And I think something also important to note is a lot of people kind of, I guess, poo-poo the whole travel therapy as a new grad because they're afraid you're not going to get any mentorship. But the majority of jobs that you go into as a new grad, if it's a perm job, they don't always offer you a mentorship program anyway. Some of them do, and there are some programs out there that will do that. But a lot of them, you're just coming in as a normal clinician, and you just network with your colleagues there and do the exact same things that I'm talking about. Hey, Megan. It was so great meeting Megan this weekend. Megan's a current student, her and her husband Ryan, and they had reached out to us before, and then we got to meet them in person, so they are looking into travel therapy as well, so thank you for joining, Megan. But yeah, what I was just talking about is even sometimes at a perm job, you may not be getting this mentorship that a lot of people so desperately seek. So it's just really a give and take, and you have to decide whether it's the right decision for you, but I know that for us, it was the right decision, and for so many other clinicians that have jumped right in as new grads, it has been the right decision.
Yeah, and on the mentorship thing, yeah, you need to clarify, like, if you're considering like a perm job versus a travel job, and you're thinking about the permanent job because there's mentorship, or they say there's mentorship, like, what does that mean? Does that mean that there's someone there that you can ask questions if you need to ask questions? Because in that case, almost every travel job, there's going to be another clinician there that you can ask for help if you need it. You know, it's very rare that you would go to a facility that wouldn't have someone that could help you and wouldn't be willing to help you because, you know, they know that you're in a tricky situation coming in and having to adapt to the documentation and the facility and the patients. So all of the coworkers on pretty much every assignment we've ever been to have been really helpful. Any questions we have, they help. They're willing to give us advice on any patients that, you know, we might not know. And so mentorship comes in a lot of different forms, but people are definitely willing to help you.
Yeah, so I think the biggest things are mentorship and then also the orientation period. So I do know that some perm jobs will give new grads a longer ramp-up period and a longer orientation period. So you honestly just need to ask your travel company, your recruiter, as well as the facility that you're interviewing with what that looks like, and be very clear about it. There's this fine line that you have to walk when you get on an interview, where you want to sound confident in your abilities and your skills to sell yourself for that job, but you don't want to sound overly confident when you know it's not going to be a good situation.
Yeah.
You know, you need to just be clear with them that, you know, I would appreciate, or just ask them, hey, what's the orientation period going to look like, that sort of thing. And it might be one of those things where you hear their responses and then you just continue with the interview and kind of put it in the back of your head and don't necessarily say one way or the other. And then at the end of the interview, you might just go back to your recruiter and say, this job doesn't sound right for me. Let's keep looking and we'll find a better one.
Yeah, so you don't want to be overconfident, but you also don't want to sound uncertain, which is, you know, if you're interviewing at a facility and you're a new grad, you have to remember that you're nervous about it, but they're nervous about having a new grad because they don't, you know, new grads vary so much in how confident they are, how good they are as clinicians. It's a huge range. We've seen that while we're traveling.
Right.
So you have to remember that you don't want to sound uncertain. So you want to ask questions, but don't say, you know, things like, well, I'm going to need help, or, you know, that kind of stuff. You want to feel it out by asking questions and see what their answer is, and kind of use that as your guide.
Right. Like, for example, like if a SNF, if you ask what the productivity is and they say 90 to 92%, that's not realistic. I don't care who you are. That's not realistic as a new grad, especially as an evaluating clinician, 90%. So that might just be something you want to just take into account and then talk to your recruiter about and say, I don't think that's realistic.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable, depending on how the interview goes, you might say, I don't think that's realistic. Would you be able to work with me if my productivity was more like 80, 85%? And if they say absolutely not, then that's just not the job for you, especially not as your first job.
Yeah, and we've had that situation. We interviewed for a skilled nursing one time, and they said it was going to be, they wanted somewhere around 90%, and we were like, you know, we don't really think that's a...
And this wasn't as a new grad. This was
No.
after we've been out for 2 years.
Yeah, and we were like, you know, we don't think that we're going to be able to hit that consistently, especially writing, you know, documentation and having to transport patients and, you know, everything you have to do in skilled nursing.
Arranging your whole schedule
Talk
for
to
the
nursing,
day. They didn't have techs.
Yeah. So, and the DOR there was like, well, you know, that's what we want you to do, but, you know, we're lenient with it, and as long as you're doing your best and we, you know, you're working hard, you're not wasting time.
Right.
You know, so some people are willing to work with you on that, and other places are not. So
And she
you'll
did.
get a feel for that.
We ended up taking the job, and I mean, a couple of times she did mention if our productivity was getting a little lower, she might say, hey, what's going on? What's keeping your productivity lower? And as long as we were able to say, well, I had, you know, this many new evals and this many new discharges and
This many meetings.
you know, this whatever, then she would be understanding. So you just need to ask those questions and make sure to clear that up in the interview.
Yep.
So I think that's most of what we wanted to go over. If you guys have any questions about traveling as a new grad, go ahead and comment below. We're going to go through a few questions. If you guys happen to ask anything that we feel like is a little bit outside the current topic, we'll either answer them for you later in the comments, or we'll kind of carry that over into a new video, because we want to keep this one pretty simple as far as just traveling as a new grad goes.
And we're going to do these videos every week, so we don't want to make them hour videos like
Right.
we've done in the past. So.
Right. We're
right.
trying to learn concise.
Yeah.
To be concise. So I think there was a question back in the beginning.
Third year student on my final rotation. I got told a lot of travel that the only setting available are SNFs. The productivity is set to unrealistic standards. If you guys could touch on your experience with this, I'd really appreciate any info.
Okay.
So that was
Yeah,
Kai.
so we kind of just touched on that. So that was what we were talking about. Yes, a lot of the facilities that are available for travel are SNFs. I'd say the most common are SNF and home health.
Yeah.
Now, SNF it can be good and it can be bad. As a new grad, like we said, you just need to make sure to feel out what type of SNF it is. We've heard of some really great SNFs, and we've also heard of some really bad ones. So they're not all bad. You just need to find out about the productivity. You need to find out if they have techs or transporters that help you. Is it the type of SNF where there's a set schedule, because that's going to cut down on your organization time, or, you know, cut down on like basically clerical work that you're having to do. I've worked at some where there were multiple buildings, and I had to spend literally an hour in the morning trying to make phone calls. I had to make phone calls to figure out which building I was going to go to at what time. And so I had to explain, you know, that's going to really cut into my productivity. So
Yeah.
SNFs aren't all bad. I don't think home health is necessarily the right thing for most new grads as your very first or
Unless
second
you had
job.
a really good clinical in that and you feel comfortable with it.
Exactly. But for most new grads, I wouldn't suggest it for your first or second job, because you are going to be out on your own.
Yeah.
Okay, and then...
So, and she said, you know, a lot of the jobs are skilled nursing or home health, but that's definitely not all of the jobs. You
Right.
can find outpatient. So I think we've worked 12 contracts now each, and 9 of my 12 have been outpatient, and I think 8 of Whitney's 12 have been outpatient. So you can definitely find outpatient jobs. I did an acute care job, and I've only worked one skilled nursing contract. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of skilled nursing, but I mean, you can find other
settings.
So
and the other thing is that we tell people about travel therapy is you have 2 main factors that you need to consider. Well, 3 if you count pay, but mainly location and setting. So if you're at least flexible on one or the other, you'll have more options. So if you are dead set on being in a certain state or a certain area, then you might be more limited in your job availability. So if you really need to be in one area and all they have are SNFs there, then yeah, you might have to take a SNF. But if you're a little bit flexible and say you have like 2 states or several areas you can choose between, then you'll have more options.
Yep. All right, we had another question. Are there travel companies that you would recommend?
Yeah, so
get in
Amanda,
contact with
if
for
you
PT student?
if you want to contact us, just shoot us a message. We'll tell you we can give you some contact information.
We don't like to give public contact information to people just because you know, giving out information or giving out email addresses and phone numbers on a big video.
Yeah.
You know.
So if you just want to shoot us a message, we'll give you the contact name for a few recruiters that we recommend to work with. There's a lot of good ones. We've talked to probably 10 or more companies and really
more than 10 for sure.
really compared them side by side, and we've taken jobs with at least 3 to 4 different companies. So it depends a lot on your recruiter, and it depends a lot on if they're willing to work with you and their understanding of working with new grads, and then also about mentorship programs. So Amanda, we'll shoot you a message, and then anybody else, if you want us to send you recruiter recommendations or company recommendations, please send us a message after this, or just comment below, and we'll send you a message.
Yep. Joey asked, is there availability for outpatient ortho as a travel PT? Definitely. That's almost all we try to. Our number one choice of contract is outpatient hospital-based ortho clinics, and that's mostly what we work in. So you can find those. If you're a single traveler or you're willing to go to a state with a lot of jobs, then you can definitely find plenty of outpatient ortho travel jobs.
Yep. So that's all the questions we've gotten so far. We're going to wrap up. If you guys have any more questions that you want to know about travel therapy, please comment below. If you guys want to talk more one-on-one, get some recommendations for us, please send us a message. We'd be happy to help you. Let's see, we got another question coming through.
I understand contracts are typically 12 weeks. How does getting a place to live for these few months work out? Is it easier or harder than it sounds? I plan on traveling multiple states.
Joey, we're going to actually do a separate video just on housing and that sort of thing. So stay tuned for that one. But we can also shoot you a message just kind of summarizing. But we're going to do a future video probably next week on housing.
Mo asked about working with multiple recruiters as a couple. Try not to drive large distances. We always recommend working with at least 2 or 3 recruiters. It makes a lot more sense that way because then you have the most job options available to you. So we've had situations where one company will have a job, I don't know, say North Carolina, and that company doesn't have any jobs within an hour drive of that job. But we look at another company's website and we find that they have a job that's 15 minutes away. So if you're only working with one company, you might miss out on some of those opportunities to have 2 jobs close to each other because one will have one and one will have another one. So we always recommend 2 to 3 companies, and we've actually worked with more than that in some cases. It just depends.
Yeah. And again, we're going to do some more videos on more specific topics, such as the ins and outs and the nuances of working as a couple or traveling as a pair.
Definitely.
So we want to wrap up, but we want to thank all of you guys for tuning in. It's really great to hear all these questions. We love to help new people that are getting started or just thinking about it. There's a lot of questions in the beginning, but once you kind of learn all the ins and outs and just jump right in, it's super exciting, and we love it. We love what we do.
Yep. If you guys could like this video, share it with people that might be interested, that'd be awesome. Any questions you have, comment on there, and we will answer those after we get off here. We'll respond to your questions. And also, if you could tag anyone that might be interested in this, that would be great.
Yep, absolutely. I saw a couple of you guys already tag some friends that might be interested in travel PT. We're happy to talk to any current students, new grads, or clinicians. Not only physical therapists. You know, we are physical therapists, but we've mentored occupational therapists, speech therapists, PTAs, and CODAs as well.
Yep, and we've got some ideas for future episodes we're going to do on this. Probably we're going to try to do every Sunday night. But if you guys have anything that you specifically want to hear about, we definitely could use more ideas.
All right. Well, thanks, y'all, for joining in, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.